Hey, so I just finished watching I'm thinking about and no, I'm thinking of ending things. And I thought it was extremely good. The one problem that I had with it was I noticed a singular uh what was it? I'm trying to think of the detail of what it was. In the dialogue, there was an inconsistency where someone said something and then later in the movie they said something else that wasn't of the that kind of contradicted what they had said earlier. This might have been done on purpose or not, but like it felt more like an error than it was done on purpose. I'm not sure. uh I originally thought that there was another line of dialogue that seemed like the writer was being a bit full of himself the way that he talked about it, like I'm smarter than you. But then after reading up more on like the writer's process of going through the script and like what he was thinking when writing it, now I don't really share that view anymore, and I totally get what he was going for in that scene because like I could relate to that. uh I will be starting with non spoilers, but later in the video I will go into spoilers, as well as my interpretation of the movie and how that correlates into the real meaning of the movie. But first, non spoilers for those who have not seen the movie, so that way you can see this. Um, what else was it that I didn't like about the movie? I think there's one other thing. I'm trying to remember now. Oh yeah, I thought that the ending, the way it was structured, was a little bit like irritating. Uh, but you know, I was fine with it for the most part. It was just more of a nitpick than anything. I just thought it was just the ending more than anything was more oddly structured and didn't come off as satisfying. I feel like if the images explained a little more what I was seeing, then I would understand. I'll go more into that in the spoiler section because I don't want to spoil the ending here, but the images were too vague that I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking at some points. Like when I read up more on what the movie entailed, I was totally wrong on what I thought the final shot of the movie I was looking at. So whoopsie daisy. Uh so now onto all the things that I like, which are plentiful because this is a Charlie Kaufman movie. And if you don't know who that is, that's the writer director of some of the most original movies out of the last couple decades, like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Being John Malkovich, Anomalisa, Synecdoche, New York. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Adaptation, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, Human Nature. Uh, yeah, so this is his latest movie that literally came out today as I'm recording this. And yeah, I'm glad it lived up to expectations, and this is probably my new favorite Netflix original movie. Probably uh because I like movies that are kind of art housey like this, where everyone has their own interpretation of how the movie played out, and every single person you'll watch this with, you'll get to see like some new perspective into the story that like you didn't realize there's that sort of way to look at it, which I love movies like that. Another good example is like The Lighthouse, because everyone has their own little story that they think the movie was telling that you didn't even think of. So that's a fun one to watch with people, and I could see myself rewatching this one a ton with other people. uh oh, I remember the other negative thing I forgot. It was I felt like the movie showed its hand too much. Like it was really predictable. The I like that it didn't shove in your face the answers. It was very ambiguous, which was kind of what was a little irritating about the ending. But it was good that it wasn't like kind of what I wanted, if that makes sense. Because like it never had any reveal scenes about what the it never had any twist reveals or any like here's what the plot really is scenes. It just always stayed vague and ambiguous. Like you never really they never truly showed you what's going on. You just had to figure it out for yourself. uh, it's kind of like Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind in that regard, except way more vague and way more close to the chest, like kind of hiding its cards more. However, I thought that the beginning of the movie revealed its cards way too quickly and revealed them way too much that I figured out what the plot really was way too quickly, because there's a lot of quick shots similar to Memento where they show you what's really going on, and they do this so that when you're watching it back uh, on an additional viewing, you're like, oh, I get it now. And I missed that the first time because it was so quick of a shot that they showed it, and there's multiple of those throughout the movie. But because I'm being so observant and it's not quite quick enough, and like I know what I'm looking out for. Even though I hadn't gotten any spoilers, I was able to notice all these on first viewing. I was like, well, that's kind of dumb that the movie spoils itself so early on. So I found that a little disappointing that I was able to unravel the mystery so quickly, because I was able to figure out what was going on like less than a third into the movie, which was kind of disappointing. Basically, once you get up to the parents' farm, right when they drove in, like that was when I figured it out. Uh, yeah. It's still like a really well done movie though. Like the story is very I like how the novel was more twisty. It's very helpful to know the novel going in if you're confused coming out of the movie, which I'm guessing most people will be. I know I was a little bit, cuz like the weird part is I did figure out the plot a third in, but then as the movie continued, it started adding more to the plot and it started getting more confusing, like little details to the plot that kind of made it more like, so wait, how does the plot work then if this and this and this? But it's like, no, it's still the plot that you figured out. It's just like these strands make it more confusing that it works and could technically maybe be plot holes. But like, yeah, I don't know. It was just odd. But yeah, it's like a fun psychological thriller thing. It also like directly addresses the audience and like what they how they're spending their time here watching the movie along with the characters. Uh and it kind of like tries to have you have an existential crisis along with these characters, which is classic Charlie Kaufman. Although, what makes this one more unique than the other ones is that it's not just about existential crisis, it's more about like identity. Yeah, kind of about the movie identity too. No, but I meant like literally about like being stripped of your my interpretation was kind of more about being stripped of your identity and like that loss of identity and like trying to figure out who you were and like what you want out of life and things like that. But I'll get more into that at the end of the review again. Uh I know that other people have uh different interpretations. And I know that Charlie Kaufman has here's the real interpretation. Once again, I'll go into all that at the very end. But yeah, other good like objective things about the movie. All four, well, actually, all five of the main leads in the movie gave fantastic performances. One of them barely says like a couple of lines, but like all of them are phenomenal in the movie. It's very well edited. It's great at like getting into your head and confusing you and trying to make it difficult for you to piece things together. The characters are very complex, and the story is also even more complex. Uh, the movie's very daring in how it presents itself. If you've seen the trailer, you know this. It goes really, really weird, and I love that. But if you're the kind of person that gets like turned off by art house movies, this may not be the best sort of thing. There's a lot of awkward comedy that's really well done because there is like a large chunk of the movie that's a meet the parents type movie. That's sort of like the middle act of the film. Uh, yeah. The third act was long. The third act was the last hour of the movie. And the first act was pretty short, but then again, there's not much to do in the first act. It was only like a half hour. Uh yeah. Yeah, that was another thing. The structure of the movie surprised me a lot. It was very subversive, which I know I've been using a lot lately, and I'm glad that I have been using that a lot lately because the way that the trailer was styled, I thought that was gonna go like a certain way, and then it very much didn't. Even though a lot of my predictions from the trailers did still reign true, like the flow of the narrative definitely was not what I was quite expecting. Um, Literally, what I thought the end point of the movie would be was the opener. So and the end point was basically I what I thought would be a midpoint was an end point. So um, yeah, there's a lot to like here. Even though I did complain about a couple of instances of dialogue, the rest of it is just classic Charlie Kaufman. It's very well written and it's very well directed. The cinematography is icy. It's haunting. Uh, the dread and atmosphere is very well done. It's another very dreamlike movie, though this one feels more like a delirious, nonsensical nightmare in places. But one that's still funny, not laugh out loud funny, but still like funny. Uh, it also like really helps to have a formidable knowledge of pop culture references because you'll need to rely on that to understand a good many of the film's uh themes and plot points. The movie does go into a lot of philosophical debates. Uh, some of them using pop culture references. And yeah, so it's good to like keep up on that if you're going in to be like pretty aware. Otherwise, you might be a little bit lost in some places on what it's trying to do and kind of like how it sort of sneers at the norm because it is such an odd movie that's like who would want to watch one of those boring normal movies when you could have something fun and weird like this. So I loved like those little jokes. Those were great. But yeah, it's very non-traditional. But it's like constantly engaging. I'm glad it didn't feel overlong like Synecdoche, New York did, even though it is longer than Synecdoche, New York. I actually felt like it could have been much longer. Uh, I uh, I was really trying to slow down and savor every second that I got of the movie because the trailer kind of spoiled too much, I think. And I wish that there was more there at the end because they showed so much of the third act in the trailer, which is weird because there was so much third act to go around. But yeah, it's just like a fun movie to like watch and try to figure out, and then I could totally see myself having fun rewatching it and then trying to piece together even more. It kind of feels like that, kind of like another Inception sort of thing, where it's like even though you're rewatching it, you're still trying to figure it out, and that's part of the appeal of rewatching it. Even though it would still stand alone, even without that as like a really good movie. Uh, it's not Charlie Kaufman's best movie, but it's not his worst either. It's just kind of in the middle there. Um, I wouldn't rank it with his top four like, oh, best movies, but I wouldn't rank it with like his two or three bottom ones that like I thought were kind of his weaker ones. So it fits very comfortably in that middle section where I didn't really put any movies. So like it seats very comfortably there. I think I'd give the movie. Okay, see, I'm between giving it a 9 out of 10 and 8.75 out of 10 just because of those little flaws that I pointed out earlier. Screw it. I'll give it a 9 out of 10. It feels very original. It was expertly crafted. It's my favorite Netflix original movie to date. I mean, come on, why not? Yeah. So, if you have not seen I'm Thinking of Ending Things, you'll want to pause the video now because we are going into spoilers. So, what is my interpretation of the movie? Uh, I thought the movie was about like okay, so my original theory was along with everyone else where it's like okay, so are the main characters like are is everyone but the main character a psychic? because because of how constantly they brought up psychics and being able to drop into people's thoughts, I was like, okay, they have to exist within the extension of the main character somehow. And when they kept randomly splicing in scenes of the janitor guy, I was like, okay, so the janitor, he's also an extension of these two somehow because the conversations that they're talking about are related to all the scenes that they're splicing in. Every time that they're talking about the school, it's the school that he's working at. It's the school where they play the Oklahoma play. So I theorize immediately that what's his name? Jesse Plemons. I forget. Was it Ted? I don't remember what Jesse Plemons' character's name is. Jake. It was Jake. So I theorized that Jake and the janitor were the same person, but that the janitor was Jake when he was a really, really old man, and that was him like uh decades removed from the present. But since time goes all wiggly wobbly, that, you know, we would catch up to him way quicker than is physically possible. And that young Jake would be able to meet future Jake because time is going way too fast, kind of like in Synecdoche, New York. Uh, so that was where I was immediately at, like by the 5 minute mark of the movie. So I was already making way faster progress than I should have at figuring out the plot. Cause that wasn't 100% right. Uh, but I got like 10, no, 20% of the details correct there. But like from there on, I started to get more of the details correct from the official analysis. And they never explained in the movie like the official right answer, so that's why I wanted to look it up afterwards. But yeah, from there on I was like, okay, so Jake and the janitor like have to be the same person. But what does that mean with like the main character who is just having an identity crisis because she goes from Lucy to Anne or like something like that or Emily. I don't know. She goes between multiple different names. So in the subtitles, they just call her young woman, which I'm like, yeah, okay. So she's like stripped of her identity. She doesn't even know who she is anymore. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. She's imagining like a future with this guy and like how that's just like kind of pathetic and like how she should just break things off. I also thought she was gonna kill herself because the title's I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and there were so many lines in the movie that seemed like they're talking about both her breaking things off with her boyfriend and her killing herself. So I thought the movie's ending was gonna be she would destroy the whole world that was already breaking apart anyways by killing herself, and simultaneously ending the relationship with her boyfriend, and that's how she ends things, quote unquote. But that wasn't how things went. Um, Another thing was the the doppelgangers that popped up for the main characters. I didn't initially recognize that they were. I hadn't seen the play or the musical for Oklahoma, but I still picked up on most of the references. When he started saying Oklahoma at the end, I figured out that that was what it was. But and like a lot of the references I picked up on, A Beautiful Mind I picked up on, the speech at the end, and like them mimicking all the shots and the really fake looking makeup. I thought that was really funny. But like there wasn't a lot of context for that final scene, so that was why it like really confused me. And when I saw that car covered in snow, I actually thought it was the car from the beginning of the movie that the couple were driving in, that Jesse Buckley and uh gosh, I just said his name. What is his name? You know who I'm talking about. Uh I thought it was the opening of the movie. But the thing was that they just like had a little mental breakdown when she finally entered his car, and they just stayed there and just let themselves freeze to death because in their minds they're going throughout the entire movie, but in reality they never moved. They're just having a freak out like mental breakdown, and they're just sitting, just like going through it all in their minds as unknowingly they were freezing to death. I thought that's what the final frame was saying, was that Jesse Buckley and gosh, why can't I remember his name? The guy from Game Night and Fargo season 2 that played Ed, the guy that plays Jake in the movie. Why can't I remember his name all of a sudden? I already said his name. Jesse Plemons. Thank you. All right. So I thought it was Jesse Buckley and Jesse Plemons. I thought it was them in the car dead. I thought that's what the final shot was from like that they never moved the car from the beginning of the movie. I thought that's what the final shot was saying. And yes, I did listen throughout the whole credits to hear all the noises and try to piece together what else I could through the end credits. Uh, I like the unique aspect ratio of the movie. Uh, Gosh, what was the other parts of my theory? I heard someone else's theory of the movie had to do with obsession, but they didn't go into details about it. I think their theory was that either Ed was obsessed with uh the young woman without name, I guess we'll call her, and he tried to mimic his whole life after her and all the pop culture references that he knew, and basically turned his life into a film. Ah, see what he did there? And that was kind of uncanny. The whole ending basically going against all the themes, where it's like, you probably shouldn't like treat women like property, and then the ending did exactly that, and all the women were like, "Yay!" And it's very like, "Oh, this is uncomfortable." Because Oklahoma did like the same exact thing in its lyrics, but like not a lot of people like pay attention to that. And they even like touched upon that in the earlier scene where it's like the baby, it's cold outside song sort of is the same thing, where you like didn't even realize that it could be thought of in a much different way than most people think of it, which a lot of songs are that way. Uh, there's also what other details? I also thought that when I was going through multiple theories in my head, another one that I was thinking about was if Jake isn't the janitor guy, then there's a possibility that Jake and the woman without names, when they're old people, that they'll just become Jake's parents, and that they're really just older versions of themselves and they don't know it. And for some reason, Jake is pretending that these people are their parents. Because a lot of their mannerisms are exactly the same. The psychotic laughter between both the woman without name and his mom, And then I thought that the janitor guy, Jake's dad, and Jake all looked very similar. Like I could see him growing old and looking like any of them. So that was interesting. I know that there's a lot of cut scenes that like explain things, like especially with the end of the movie, so that makes a lot of sense why the ending felt much more jarring than the rest of the movie. Because I was able to follow the plot until the last 10 minutes of the movie. Once I got to the beautiful mind speech, that was when I got confused. The pig thing was fine. I understood the pig thing. That was like, yeah, this makes sense. But then once I got to the speech, it was like, it was like that last scene and the end credits that confused me. That was just what threw me for a loop. Uh, but yeah, if you don't know the real interpretation of the movie, I'll go into that now. So it's basically that, for those who don't know, if you hadn't read the book like me, uh, the main, it's kind of like the, oh no, maybe I shouldn't say what's kind of like in case you hadn't seen it. Um, so both the reason why her thoughts can be heard by Jake is because that whole timeline of them going up to visit the parents, all that is just a fantasy playing out inside the janitor's head, and none of it is real. Or at least real in the sense that they're all like people that coexist that were like born. They were more so like made. They were like a fantasy that he had of like, what if I had a love life and like wasn't so alone? Because the poem was all about like isolation and like coming home to having like a wife and a dog and all this stuff, all these things that this alternate reality like were all about. And that was kind of what triggered it for me, where I was like, oh, I see where this is going. Um, so that was the original twist in the book, was that none of that was real. It was all just in the janitor's head. But the movie, being from Charlie Kaufman, changed things. What it changed was that it did the thing from some other property, which I will not name, where uh fictional characters within the movie's universe exist within non-fictional characters within the movie's universe simultaneously as like non-real and real people. So like characters that don't exist still exist as unreal people in the real world, if that makes sense. And that's why a real person is able to meet a person that isn't real. So it leaves it very vague as to how real is this fantasy exactly. Because yes, it's playing out in his head, but then somehow he meets himself, or at least a part of himself. So that begs the question, is he meeting himself in his head, or is he meeting himself in real life? Uh, and it was the janitor who was staying in his car looking at the cartoon who died in his truck while fantasizing about going out buck naked with the pig. But he never actually did any of that. He just stayed in the car as it got frozen over and died of hypothermia, as the character talked about earlier. So that was like the real thing. And he also like the deleted scene that was very crucial to explaining the whole A Beautiful Mind thing was that what if the characters aged alongside him? And he thought of that when he found this makeup container that was left behind in one of the locker rooms, and he was like, yeah, just like apply the makeup to like the characters and then ta-da. So that he just imagined uh that one character reciting the Beautiful Mind speech and then doing the song from Oklahoma. Yeah, so that pretty much covers it, I think. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.